Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Always Compete Seahawks podcast. I am your host today, D-Friend, joined with my co-host, Sam. Today we're going to talk about a topic that's going to get a lot of Seahawks fans excited, whereas some of our other videos were just like depth signings, whatever. Now we're going to get into the actual like sexy positions. So one of our biggest needs on the Seahawks right now is our wide receiver 3 position. And right now I think we have probably Freddie Swain as our wide receiver 3, who was a 7th-round pick last year. Not ideal, but thankfully for us, there are some options that we could do. Two of those options that we're going to talk about today are through free agency. One by the name of Antonio Brown, might have heard him, one of the best receivers of this generation. And two, a guy who's lesser known but could still be really, really good, Marquise Goodwin. So I think right off the bat, if we just get into the Antonio Brown one, because I think this is the one that perks up the ears of Seahawks fans the most. I think it is the one that's going to cause the most headlines. So what is, if you had to guess, Sam, what is like the likelihood or the probability that we could get our hands on Antonio Brown?
We're probably looking at something around like maybe a 15%, 20% chance. I really like Antonio Brown, and I think he's a very potent weapon that could really bring some flexibility to this offense at a wide receiver 3. But frankly, I don't think he wants to leave Tampa Bay. Like, I really think that he's keen on staying there and not leaving. So, like, the fact that, he, like, even today on Instagram, the Bucks had a post and he commented on it, sign at AB. He added himself on their own post. And I mean, the report is from Mike Garafolo that they are not close on money right now, which is also interesting to me because that means, like, I thought that we could inside Antonio Brown at like 1 year 3. He might be like 1 year 6, 1 year 7, if like, because like to be far apart on money is one thing. Like, to be like apart on money, like 1 or 2 million apart, is different. To be like far apart, that's like a $5 million difference. Yeah. I don't know how much he's going to cost, and there's no real reported cost, but I mean, obviously would be a very, very good addition. And maybe a low probability, but a very good,
I think another few nuggets that are important here. Number one, the Bucks do have money problems, regardless of what you've been seeing. They've re-signed all of their players, which is just insane. But they do have money issues. They have seriously constraints on their cap. So maybe they can't afford AB, number one. Number two, his agent, Drew Rosenhaus, is one of the best agents. He's the Scott Boras of the NFL. I mean, he is one of the best player agents in the league. So I'm guessing he's going to want to bargain for every penny that his client can get. And another thing that's very interesting to me is what you mentioned, far from the money. Antonio Brown loves Tom Brady. Antonio Brown twice in the last 2 years has taken significantly less than what he probably could have gotten other places to go play with Tom Brady in New England and in Tampa Bay. So we know that Russell Wilson loves Antonio Brown. We know that Antonio Brown likes Russell. They've worked out in the summers and they've, done this and they've thrown with each other. But will Antonio Brown love the offer that the Seahawks can give him? I think that's the biggest issue because we don't exactly have a lot of money either. And he's definitely the more expensive option between him and Marquise. But honestly, he was productive. Last season, played 8 games in the regular season. I believe he had 480 receiving yards. Playing a full game, that's damn near a 1,000-yard receiver. I mean, that's great production. Had 2 touchdowns in the postseason, one in the Super Bowl. Was great for the Buccaneers, honestly. So I think that he's worth probably a 1 year, 5 or 6 deal if that's what the Seahawks want to give him. I wouldn't have a problem with that. If we start getting to the 8, 9, 10s is where I don't know. Mm-hmm. But what would you give him if you had to like set a number?
Well, I think like one of the main things that you would probably have to do, you could probably give him a very low initial value deal. You could probably give him like a 1 year, $4 million with $3 million guaranteed and a $1 million and like a $2 million base salary or something like that.
Yeah.
But I think one of the main things that you'd have to do is give him a very incentive-laden contract. You'd have to likely give him a lot of incentives. Like, we're talking like maybe up to $5 million, like $5 extra million in just incentives. Mm-hmm. Because I mean, Antonio Brown, he's a guy who obviously thinks very high of himself. He's a guy who that's well documented. It's been well documented that he thinks very high of himself and is really a lot of people call it selfish. I call it more of a competitive football player, and I think that he's really vying for himself to be the best.
Mhm.
And sometimes his kind of attitude can get in the way of him, but I don't think that that's necessarily anything important. Obviously he brings a little bit of baggage,
Mhm.
and I think that that's a main reason that a lot of Seahawks fans will not be on board with signing Antonio Brown.
I think two things about that really quick. I think last year when this was around, when I think like mid-season last year, when we had the Antonio Brown saga, where is he going to sign? And Seahawks were obviously one of the potential suitors, and people will say, "Oh no, we don't want a guy like Antonio Brown. He's going to cause problems." Yada yada yada. Well, he was fine with Tampa Bay. The
Mhm.
last, 3 quarters of the year, he had no problems with Tampa Bay. He was great. He kept his mouth shut. He didn't have antics off the field. So if we can get that Antonio Brown, I think absolutely we do it. Are you kidding me? Absolutely. Number one, that's number one. Number two, we have a guy at quarterback who's not only a phenomenal quarterback, but he's a great human being. I mean, for Christ's sake, he just won Walter Payton Man of the Year. So if there's any quarterback that could, I guess, calm down AB, I'm sure it would be Russ. Um, so again, should we sign him? I don't think that would be too much of a concern. There's not a lot of ego on this team. Pete Carroll's a very player-friendly coach. We're gonna hopefully pass the ball a lot more. And I don't see how Antonio Brown would be a locker room cancer if we signed him, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it kind of reminded me of something. I'm going to bring Seahawks back to a very dark memory. Do you remember the Eddie Lacy contract and when
Oof.
he came here?
Oh,
And
we went from beast
and
mode to
one of the
feast mode.
incentives that they gave him, which was if you come back, we're going to have consistent weigh-ins, and if you're under 240, you get an extra $600,000 or something
Couldn't
like
make it. I remember he couldn't make it.
that. Yeah, and like I think what you could do is that like, yo, AB, listen, 1 month without incidents, that's a $100,000 incentive right there.
Mhm.
Slap it in his face, just be like, hey, here's money for staying quiet, not being an issue with the team.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that he would be an issue to a team without the incentives, but just give him that extra reason to not be an issue with the team.
Yeah. It's like
And
those bad kids in school, and like if they went like a month without getting in trouble, the teachers would buy them McDonald's or something. I
yeah,
mean, dude, I don't have a problem with that. I was
yeah,
never
right.
that
You
kid,
gotta
by the
get
way. I never got in trouble.
yeah. Overall, like I feel like a lot of the Seahawks world here is going to come down to more like, do you think that like, do you want to take the moral side and maybe say, well, he has some past baggage that we don't want to endorse here. We want out of this. And then there's the side of people that are like, well, first off, he wasn't bad last year, and he wasn't really a real issue for like 7 years of his career, and then in the last couple of years in Pittsburgh, and then when he went to Oakland and New England.
He just kind of had like a temper tantrum for like a year and a half.
Yeah. But like, and then there's that side that's also like, but he's a really good football player, like a really, really, really good football player. And I mean, there's a lot of other good reasons. Think of something that the Seahawks were really bad at on offense last year.
Pass protecting.
You're not wrong, but getting yards after the catch. What is Antonio Brown really good at? Getting yards after the catch. And what is vital in Shane Waldron's scheme?
Yeah.
Getting yards after the catch.
Let's clarify. Getting yards after the catch by people not named like DK Metcalf and like Tyler Lockett. Outside of those two, we really struggle with Yak.
David Moore, were like a bottom 5 yards after catch team in the NFL.
Which is partly because Russell Wilson throws moon balls, but it's also because, again, outside of those two guys, we didn't really have great athletes catching the ball.
Yeah.
And Tony Brown, I don't know, man, if you ever seen him without his shirt on, he's a good athlete.
Yeah.
That came out weirder than I thought it would, but you understand my point. So I think I would love to have Antonio Brown. I think under the right price, I think he'd be a great addition. Yeah. Do I think we're going to get him? No.
Low probability.
I honestly think he will re-sign with Tampa. They'll figure it out. Tom Brady will kiss him on the mouth like he does his son. He'll be back in Tampa.
Whoa, throwing shade. I'm sure that Russ is really pushing the Seahawks and Antonio Brown. I'm sure he's in AB's DMs every day. Like, bro, we got something cooking over here.
That's the last thing I wanted to mention. Actually, I was like, what am I forgetting? Signing Antonio Brown would be great because it would make Russell Wilson happy. And as we've said probably a million times, close to it. If it makes Russ happy, then we're happy. Happy Russ, happy life. You know what I mean?
For
If
sure.
Russell Wilson wants Antonio Brown, you get Antonio Brown. If Russell Wilson wants, you know, Chick-fil-A on Thursdays, you get him Chick-fil-A on Thursdays. It's like you just got to make the guy happy, especially
Mhm.
with all this off-season craziness and yada yada yada. Make the guy happy. Sign Antonio Brown.
Yeah.
So
What a
transitioning segueing into our next player, who is a little lesser known. We're not going to talk probably as much about him. Marquise Goodwin, a former division rival, current. I believe he was. Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't he make like the U.S. or almost make like the U.S. Olympics for like a track or something like that?
Yeah.
Like he is
Yeah, he
really
almost did
fast.
like back when he was coming out of college.
Hmm.
Last year, kind of a complicated situation. Um, he was on San Francisco. San Francisco gets Brandon Ayuk, and they're like, "Hey, we don't want you anymore." They ship him out to Philadelphia. He immediately opts out. But
Yeah.
due to the fact that he opted out, he was then reverted back to San Francisco, where they had to carry his salary, and then at the end of the year, they cut him. And he hasn't had much reported interest from what I've heard. Not to say that he hasn't had any interest from anywhere else, but he hasn't had much reported interest.
Right.
And I feel like this interest really just comes back to one main word: speed. He's very, very fast, like really fast.
I actually, while you were talking, just looked up his 40-yard dash time. You want to take a guess at what his 40-yard dash was?
I've seen it. It's like 4.26, 4.27, something like that.
4.27. The fastest 40-yard dash ever recorded was 4.22. He ran a
Mhm.
4.27.
You know how much it's like small 0.05 seconds is
That's
like.
really fast.
Yeah,
He's a track star. This is not a guy who's your number one wide receiver, but like we don't need a number one wide receiver. We have two phenomenal wide receivers. We want a guy, in my opinion, if we can't get like an Antonio Brown type receiver, we want a guy that can stretch the field. And this guy will stretch the field until it breaks in half. I mean, can
yeah,
you talk about taking the top off of a defense? Imagine how good it would be to have a defense cover and devote so much time and effort to covering Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, and then damn, Marquise just ran past their safeties and Russell Wilson just threw a moon ball over our heads.
yeah.
I mean, that is just
Yeah,
amazing.
imagine like a four verts with
Whew,
DK and Tyler,
whew,
Marquise Goodwin, and then Gerald Everett.
whew. That's just not
Like
fair, man. That is not fair.
it's a total mismatch. And I mean, Marquise Goodwin brings a lot of flexibility. With the evolving state of the NFL, something that the Seahawks have not had is a Swiss Army knife. A Swiss Army knife is what they need. Like Debo Samuel is a Swiss Army knife. Robert Woods is a Swiss Army knife. Guys like that who can kind of, get reverses, get screens, go deep, do anything that you want them to do, and they can do it. That's a Swiss Army knife. The Seahawks have not had a guy like that because David Moore was really not a Swiss Army knife. And I think it was just David Moore as wide receiver 3 the whole
David
time.
Moore, I'm just not a David Moore guy. So
Yeah.
he was not when another word for like a Swiss Army knife is like a gadget player.
Mm-hmm.
If any of you guys watch the Bears out there, Cordell Patterson's like their gadget player. He returns
Mm-hmm.
kicks. He lines up at running back. He lines up at wide receiver. Sometimes he blocks as a tight end. They got to put him everywhere. I think if we can acquire a guy like Marquise Goodwin, the Rams love their end arounds. I am sure Shane Waldron is going to bring some of those to Seattle. We're going to run end arounds. We're going to run screen passes. We're going to run him deep down the field. He's going to do everything. And if he can stay healthy with his speed, good Lord, is that hard for defenses to cover. So just kind of looking at his stats really quick because I just wanted to, see myself. His best season was 2017.
Yeah, he had like 900 something yards, right? Like
You're
900.
good, Sam. He's got that year. He had 56 catches for 962 yards, averaged 17 yards a catch, which is really good. Which again, going back to what you were saying, really helps with the yak. He
Yeah.
had 2 touchdowns that year. So, and I mean, and that was I believe that was when they had like Nick Mullins or
No,
whatever.
that
So,
was when they had Beathard. I remember
oh my
watching him with
God.
Beathard. I remember
Oh,
watching.
even better. And
Yeah. And I mean, think about it. That was him as a wide receiver 1 at his best. That was him as a
right,
wide receiver 1. So
right.
like you wonder what he can do as like a wide receiver 3. We
Oh,
know that he has the
oh,
potential to be a wide receiver 1. And I mean, y'all can hate me as much as you want. He's much faster than Antonio Brown. Like
Oh,
Antonio
much
Brown's
faster.
shifty and very hard to stay in front of. He will just run past you, and it
Antonio
will be
Brown
a split second. Just gone.
Antonio Brown is a much better wide receiver, runs better routes, has better hands. I think it's probably a little smarter, but you can't teach speed, man. Marquise is just
Mhm.
fast. He is fast, fast,
Yeah.
fast. And honestly, when you're at number 3, I would not want Marquise as my number 1 wide receiver. Absolutely not. But when you're at number 3 and you have 2 elite wide receivers, does he need to be the best route runner? Does he need to have the greatest hands? He's fast. He's literally an Olympic athlete. He's Olympian level speed. I
Yeah.
totally said that incorrectly, but you know what I mean. I
Mhm.
mean, he is a literal speed demon. So, and another plus side, he's going to be much cheaper than Antonio Brown was because he's never been an elite wide receiver in his career. He's not coming off a Super Bowl. He didn't play
And
last year.
he hasn't been a pretty good receiver as of late either.
Right.
So
Right. Um, I think that honestly, if Seattle can get him for like 2 or under million,
they could probably realistically, coming off a year where he opted out, you could probably get him for like 1 year, 1.5.
and if that's a guy who gets 400 yards, and
And on
again,
like 30 catches and
a
just
guy like this, you don't even need to have 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns. If he gets like 400 yards and creates opportunities for the other receivers, it's totally worth it for 1.5 million.
Mhm.
There's not and like you mentioned earlier, there's not a huge market for him. There's not teams chomping at the bit to get him. So
Yeah.
Seattle, come swoop him in, take another ex-49er, and I'm all for it, man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think honestly, I'd be open to both, and I think that's gonna wrap up our episode
Mm-hmm.
today. Expect much more coming from the wide receiver talk in the coming days from us.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have something coming for y'all on the podcast. Check it out on wherever you get your podcasts. And we appreciate you for watching. Stay tuned. See you next time. Peace out.
Bye.